Chapter 1, The Dance Beneath the Mask. The ballroom glittered like a dream, golden chandeliers dripping crystals, the air fragrant with roses and expensive perfume. Strings swelled from a live orchestra, their music curling through the crowd like smoke. The annual midnight masquerade was a place where rules dissolved. Faces were hidden. Names didn't matter. Here, you could be anyone. Alara Winters had told herself she was only here because of Maya's relentless persuasion. You need a night out, Alara, her best friend had insisted. Something reckless. Something you'll remember. And now, here she was, standing in the middle of a swirling crowd of strangers draped in silks and masks, a glass of champagne sweating in her hand, her heart not entirely sure what it was doing. Her mask was a delicate silver filigree, catching the light every time she moved. Her gown, deep midnight blue, clung to her curves and brushed the floor like a whisper. She was scanning the room, half lost in thought, when she felt it. A presence. She turned, and there he was. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black tuxedo so perfectly cut it seemed part of him. His mask was simple, matte black, concealing half his face, but leaving his jaw and mouth visible. And that mouth curved into the faintest of smirks as his gaze met hers. Without a word, he offered his hand. Something inside her whispered that she should refuse. This was a stranger, after all. But something louder, something warmer, told her to step forward. She placed her hand in his, and the world around them dissolved into music. His palm was warm against hers, his grip steady. He pulled her into the rhythm with ease, as if they had been partners for years. The way he moved, controlled yet unhurried, made her pulse skip. The scent of him, faint and masculine with a hint of cedarwood, wrapped around her like a spell. You dance beautifully, his deep voice murmured near her ear. I'm only following your lead, she replied, her voice softer than she intended. Then follow me, he said, and the words felt like a promise. They moved as if gravity belonged to them alone. The crowd blurred into colors and shadows. Each turn brought her closer to him, his hand at her waist firm yet tender, his eyes, dark and unreadable, holding hers through the mask. And then, as the music slowed, he bent slightly, his lips close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath. Tell me your name, he said. She hesitated, suddenly aware of the rules of the masquerade, no real names, no strings, no consequences. Names ruin the magic, she whispered. He smiled faintly, almost as if pleased by her answer. The final note of the music lingered in the air, and before she could think, before she could stop herself, he kissed her. It wasn't hesitant. It was deep, warm, and lingering, the kind of kiss that pulled the breath from her chest and replaced it with fire. She felt her fingers tighten against his shoulder, felt the world tilt. When he finally pulled back, his eyes lingered on hers for one last moment, intense, searching, and then, without another word, he stepped away into the crowd. By the time she realized she wanted to follow him, he was gone. The morning light crept in through the thin gap between Alara's curtains, soft and golden. She stirred beneath her sheets, eyes still heavy with sleep, her mind pulling at fragments of last night like pieces of a dream she couldn't quite hold on to. But it hadn't been a dream. She could still feel it, the warmth of his hand at her waist, the weight of his gaze through the mask, the way the world had tilted when his lips touched hers. The memory was too vivid to fade. She rolled onto her back, pressing a palm to her forehead. Who was he? The masquerade had been a blur of colors, laughter, and champagne. She hadn't even thought to look for him afterward, somehow, she'd convinced herself the kiss had been the ending of a perfect, unrepeatable scene. A moment meant to stay in the dark. And yet. She got out of bed, padded barefoot into the kitchen, and poured herself coffee. Maya's text arrived just as she took her first sip. Maya, Sue, how was your night, Cinderella? Eyes. Alara bit her lip, typing back slowly. Alara, I met someone. Maya, details. Now. She hesitated, unsure how to explain a connection that felt almost unreal. Alara, tall. Black tux. Black mask. We danced. He kissed me. Then he disappeared. Maya, you mean like, poof? Elara, exactly like poof. A beat later, Maya replied. Maya, girl, that's not a man, that's a romance novel. Elara laughed under her breath, but the truth was, she felt oddly restless. She told herself she'd never see him again, that was the point of the masquerade. But there was a tug in her chest, an ache that whispered she'd just lost something she hadn't even had the chance to claim. That Monday, she tried to push him out of her mind. She buried herself in work at the sleek glass office of Voss and Hart Marketing, sipping cold coffee as she clicked through campaign drafts. The elevator dinged behind her. She barely glanced up, expecting another colleague hurrying in for the morning meeting. And froze. The man who stepped out was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His dark eyes swept the room with quiet authority, his presence bending the air around him. And even without the mask, she knew. Her fingers curled around the edge of her desk. Her pulse hammered in her throat. It was him. The stranger from the masquerade. He stopped in front of the glass conference room, speaking in low tones to the senior director. She couldn't hear a word, but she didn't need to, his voice was already etched in her memory. Then, the director turned toward the staff. Everyone, meet Damien Voss. Effective today, he'll be overseeing our division. Her heart stumbled. Voss. As in Voss and Hart. As in the new boss. The rest of the morning passed in a haze. Elara sat at her desk, pretending to focus on her marketing briefs, but every movement from across the office pulled her attention like a magnet. Damien Voss didn't just walk into a room, he owned it. The way he spoke to people was calm yet commanding, his presence impossible to ignore. And she couldn't stop replaying it. The dance. The kiss. The way his hand had fit perfectly against her waist. Get it together, Elara. But the universe, or fate, or perhaps sheer cruelty, had other plans. Just before lunch, the senior director stopped by her desk. Elara, Mr. Voss wants you in his office. Now. Her stomach did a somersault. His office was at the far end of the floor, a corner space walled with glass and flooded with light. Inside, Damien stood near the window, city skyline sprawling behind him like a painted backdrop. He turned when she entered, and for a moment, they just looked at each other. Miss Winters, he said, his voice smooth, deep, and infuriatingly unreadable. Close the door. She did, her pulse loud in her ears. I wasn't aware you worked here, he continued, taking a slow step toward her. And I wasn't aware you owned the place, she replied, trying for composure. He studied her, his gaze tracing her face as if committing every detail to memory. Last night, his voice dipped lower. Was unexpected. Her breath caught. It was a masquerade. Things happen. His mouth curved slightly. Things? She swallowed. A dance. A kiss. Nothing more. His eyes darkened. Nothing more, he echoed, but there was a faint edge to his tone, like he didn't quite believe her. Or didn't want to. He stepped closer, closing the distance until the desk was the only thing between them. She could smell him again, cedarwood and something darker, something intoxicating. I intend to keep things professional, he said at last. For both our sakes. Good, she managed, though her voice was softer than she'd hoped. But, he added, leaning just slightly forward, that doesn't mean I've forgotten. Her breath hitched. Neither have I. For a moment, neither moved. The tension between them was thick enough to feel, like an invisible thread pulling taut. She could almost feel his touch again, almost see the masked stranger who had kissed her like no one ever had. Then, with an almost reluctant step back, Damien straightened. You may go, Miss Winters. She left his office on unsteady legs, her heart thudding wildly, because she knew, without a doubt, this wasn't over. Chapter 4, Rules and Tension. The week crawled by in a slow burn. Damien was the perfect picture of professionalism, sharp suits, concise instructions, measured tone, but beneath it, Alara could feel him. Every time his gaze lingered a fraction too long during meetings. Every time his voice dropped lower when he addressed her directly. It was torture, and maybe, she didn't want it to end. By Thursday evening, most of the office had cleared out, but Alara was still at her desk, eyes bleary from staring at campaign data. The soft hum of the city filtered in from beyond the glass walls. Still here? She looked up to see Damien leaning in her doorway, jacket gone, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. She tried not to stare. She failed. I want to get the heart proposal perfect before tomorrow's meeting, she said, pushing her hair back. He stepped in, glancing over the papers spread across her desk. You're thorough. I like that. The compliment sent a small, involuntary thrill down her spine. Come on, he said, nodding toward his office. We'll go through it together. His office felt different at night. The city lights outside glowed like a sea of stars, casting the room in warm gold and deep shadow. He stood behind her chair as she pointed out figures on the screen, his presence close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. At one point, he leaned over her to reach the mouse, his hand brushing against hers. Just a light touch, but her breath caught. He noticed. Slowly, deliberately, Damien's gaze found hers. Careful, Miss Winters, he murmured. Lines are easier to cross than you think. Her pulse hammered. Maybe some lines want to be crossed. The words slipped out before she could stop them. For a long moment, he just watched her, eyes dark, searching, before circling around the desk. Now he stood in front of her, close enough to touch, close enough to feel the faint stir of his breath against her cheek. Do you know what happens, he said softly, if I stop pretending I don't want you? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She didn't need to answer. His hand came up, fingers brushing the side of her face, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She leaned into his touch without meaning to. And then, almost painfully, he pulled back. Not yet. The words left her dizzy, half from frustration, half from anticipation. Because now, she was certain. When he finally gave in, it wouldn't be gentle. Friday night found the office nearly empty. The only sounds were the low hum of the air conditioning and the distant roll of thunder outside. Rain streaked the tall glass windows, blurring the city lights into soft halos. Alara sat at her desk, reviewing the final slides for the heart proposal. She was just about to pack up when Damien's voice drifted from his office. Miss Winters, come here for a moment. Something in his tone, low, warm, almost private, sent a shiver down her spine. She stepped inside to find him leaning against his desk, sleeves rolled up again, collar open just enough to hint at skin. He gestured to the presentation on his laptop. I want your opinion before tomorrow. She moved to stand beside him, her shoulder brushing his. The scent of him, cedarwood and rain, wrapped around her like an invisible tether. A flash of lightning lit the room, followed by a deep rumble of thunder. The rain was heavier now, tapping against the glass in a steady rhythm. Damien's eyes were on the screen at first, but slowly, inevitably, they shifted to her. You're trembling, he murmured. She swallowed. It's the storm. Is it? His voice was softer now, his gaze steady. Her breath caught. She should have stepped back. She didn't. In the next moment, his hand found hers on the desk, warm, strong, deliberate. He didn't move closer right away. He just looked at her, as though giving her one last chance to walk away. She didn't take it. The kiss happened like gravity, inevitable. 1 second, there was a charged silence between them, the next, his lips were on hers. It wasn't cautious this time. It was hungry. His hand cupped her jaw, tilting her head so he could kiss her deeper. She tasted faint traces of coffee and something darker, intoxicating. Her fingers curled in the front of his shirt, pulling him closer until there was no space left between them. When he finally broke the kiss, his forehead rested against hers, his breathing ragged. "We shouldn't be doing this," he whispered, though his thumb brushed over her lower lip like he couldn't help himself. "Then stop," she breathed. But neither of them moved. A clap of thunder made the glass shiver. Damien's hand slid to the small of her back, pulling her against him again for a second, slower kiss, one that felt less like a mistake and more like a promise. When they parted, his expression was unreadable, but his voice was certain. "This changes everything." And she knew he was right. By Monday morning, Alara had convinced herself she could be professional again. The kisses, were a slip, an intense moment in the storm. They could tuck it away and move forward. At least, that's what she told herself, until the conference room door opened. "Everyone," the senior director announced, "Julian Hart will be joining us for today's strategy meeting." Alara's eyes flicked up, and met the smile of a man who could have stepped straight out of a luxury magazine spread. Tall, tailored, blonde hair perfectly styled, blue eyes glinting with charm that felt just a little too polished. He shook hands with the team, his gaze lingering on her longer than was necessary. "And you are?" "Alara Winters," she replied, offering her hand. "Beautiful name," he said smoothly, holding her hand a beat too long before releasing it. From across the table, Damien's expression barely shifted, but Alara caught it. The faint tightening of his jaw. The way his eyes cooled. Throughout the meeting, Julian's attention kept drifting to her. Every time she spoke, he leaned in as if her words were the only ones that mattered. When she presented a slide, he smiled like she was telling him a secret. And Damien didn't smile at all. When the meeting ended, Julian caught up to her in the hallway. "I'm in town for a few weeks," he said, walking beside her. "Maybe we could discuss marketing strategies over dinner?" Before she could answer, Damien appeared, silent, sudden, standing just close enough to make Julian pause. "I'm sure Miss Winters has more than enough on her plate this week," Damien said smoothly, his gaze locked on Julian. "I'll see to it her schedule remains focused on our current projects." Julian's smile didn't falter, but something sharper flickered behind his eyes. "Of course. Wouldn't dream of interfering." When he walked away, Damien's gaze shifted to her. "Be careful with him," he murmured. "You mean your business partner?" she asked, folding her arms. "Business rival," he corrected. "And he doesn't take no easily." There was a beat of silence before she asked the question that had been building since the meeting began. "You seemed tense." Damien's eyes softened, just a fraction. "Because I don't like sharing what's mine." Her heart stuttered. "And am I?" His lips curved into the faintest, most dangerous smile. "You know the answer to that." That night, Alara stayed late at the office, the quiet hum of the floor strangely comforting after the day's undercurrents. She was halfway through finalizing a campaign draft when she noticed movement in the reflection of her screen. Damien stood in her doorway. No jacket, no tie, just the white shirt, sleeves rolled up, top buttons undone. Rain beaded faintly on his hair and shoulders, like he'd just come in from the night. "Working late?" he asked. "Seems to be a habit," she said, forcing her eyes back to her laptop. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Julian asked you to dinner, didn't he?" She blinked at him. "Are you following me now?" His jaw tightened. "I don't trust him." "Because he's your rival?" "Because he has a history," Damien said, his tone sharp enough to slice through the air. She studied him, sensing there was more beneath the surface. "You're not telling me everything." His eyes met hers, dark and unreadable for a long moment. Then, finally, he exhaled and sat on the edge of her desk. "I didn't go to the masquerade that night for the charity," he said. "I went because Julian was there. I was trying to block a deal I knew would ruin people. But I wasn't looking for you." Her pulse quickened. "And yet you found me." "I saw you across the floor," he said quietly, almost to himself. "Blue dress. Silver mask. You looked Like the one thing in that room that wasn't pretending to be something it wasn't. Heat flushed her cheeks. "That's a line," she whispered. "It's not," he replied, leaning in just slightly. "It's the truth." She tried to mask the way her heart was pounding. "So what does Julian have to do with any of this?" Damien's jaw flexed. "He plays nice in public, but behind closed doors, he takes what he wants. If he thinks you're a way to get at me, he won't stop." The words sent a chill through her, though she kept her voice steady. "And what if I can handle myself?" Damien's gaze softened. "I'm sure you can. But that doesn't mean I'll let you fight him alone." For a moment, neither moved. The rain tapped harder against the glass, filling the silence between them. Then, as if deciding something, Damien reached out, his fingers brushing along her jaw, tilting her face toward him. "Whatever happens next," he said softly, "you need to know, you're not just a distraction to me, Elara. You never were." Her breath caught, and before she could reply, his lips brushed hers, just barely, before he stood, leaving her trembling in the quiet.